Ayan. So, bakit tayo nag-a-adjust? To update the accounts as of our year-end or period end. Yan. Kasi, when we do adjusting, when we record our journal entries, sometimes we record like prepaid rent or prepaid insurance, we record them as asset or directly expense. But at the end of the year, some of it or some of the or portion of that asset is not yet is already expired. It's already expired. So when you record it as an asset first, you need to expense the expired portion at the end of the year, so that at the end of the year, your asset account will not be overstated and your expense account will not be understated. So adjusting entries are necessary because the trial balance, the first pulling together of the transaction, may not contain up-to-date and complete data because of the following reasons. Yan. Inefficient to record accounts daily, and some costs that are incurred with the passage of time are not recorded. So yun na. Kapag nag-record kayo ng asset, upon passage of time, they expire, so you have to update that. So they are required every time a company prepares financial statements to update the accounts that affect more than one accounting period. Yan. And always include an income statement account and a balance sheet account. Yan. So we have two major types of adjusting entries. You have the deferrals and the accruals. Under deferrals, you have prepaid expenses, unearned revenues. So these are prepaid expense. So prepaid expenses are expenses paid in advance. Unearned revenues are cash received from clients or customers, but we didn't perform the service yet, or we didn't deliver the goods they have purchased from us yet. And then accruals, you have accrued revenues and accrued expenses. So later on, we will discuss each one. Okay? Yeah. So under adjusting entries also, you have timing issues, fiscal and calendar year. So you have to know if the business is using the fiscal or the calendar year period. So ano nga ba yung fiscal year period? Sino makakaalala? And ano din yung calendar year period?
Yung fiscal, ma'am, parang wala siyang exact month kung kailan ka mag-start. Like any month lang, ma'am. Basta 12 months pa rin siya. Sa calendar, ma'am, January talaga sa ma'am to December.
Yes, correct. Ang fiscal year nag-i-start any month during the year, even February until December. So any month other than January 1, yun yung fiscal year start period nyo, and ends 12 months thereafter. But the calendar year, it starts exactly at January 1 and ends December 31. So you have to take note when you are solving a problem, you need to determine first if the company is using calendar year or fiscal year, so that you will know what is your cut-off date, as of which date lang kayo mag-a-update ng accounts. Yan. Okay? So, we will now discuss about accrual versus cash basis of accounting. So, adjusting entries are, the purpose of adjusting entries is to bring the books, is to reflect the books using accrual basis of accounting instead of cash basis of accounting. So under accrual, you recognize revenue when it is earned, and you recognize expense when it is incurred, regardless of cash. Under cash basis naman, you recognize revenue when cash is received, and you recognize expense when it is paid. So we don't use cash basis of accounting. We always use accrual basis of accounting. That's why even when we paid cash already, but we didn't incur that expense, we need to bring it back as an asset because we didn't incur it yet. So we reflect the books under accrual basis of accounting when we adjust. Okay, so we follow the accrual basis of accounting. Cash basis accounting is not in accordance with GAAP. So you have also the matching principle. This means that expense recognition is tied to revenue recognition. Efforts or expenses must be matched with results or revenues. Yan. So what are deferrals? Deferrals are costs or revenues that are recognized at a date later than the point when cash was originally exchanged. Companies make adjusting entries for deferrals to record the portion of the deferred item that was incurred as an expense or earned as revenue during the current accounting period. Yan. So example dito, yan, later, cost or revenues are recognized at a date later. So later pa dapat siyang i-recognize. Pero na-receive nyo na ang cash. Yan. So you need to make adjusting entries for deferral. Like i-defer nyo. Defer ano ba? I-delay nyo ang pag-record ng revenue or ng expense kahit na naka-receive na kayo ng cash. Kasi hindi nyo, wala pa kayong right sa revenue na yun or hindi nyo pa na-incur ang expense na yun. This is the concept of deferral. You also have prepaid expense or prepayment. So expenses already paid but not yet incurred or used. So these are costs that expire either with the passage of time or through use do not require daily entries, which would be impractical and unnecessary. Okay, so it is an adjusting entry for prepaid expenses results in an increase or debit to an expense account and a decrease or credit to an asset account. So under prepaid expense, you have two methods of recording. So you have to determine also when you are adjusting which method you used initially when recording the transaction. So you have to check if you used asset method or if you use expense method. Under asset method, your journal entry upon paying for that expense is debit prepaid expense, which is an asset account. So under asset method, you debited initially an asset account and credit cash. So the adjusting entry at the end of the accounting period to recognize the expense portion of that prepaid asset, you will debit the expense and credit the prepaid expense or prepaid asset account. Yan. The amount on the adjusting entry represents the expired or used portion of the prepayment. Okay, so clear ba sa inyo yung asset method? Asset method, basically, di ba pag nag-record kayo, nagbayad kayo ng 1 year worth of insurance. So you just debited prepaid insurance. Prepaid insurance is an asset account. So you use asset method when you debited this account. If expense method naman, you debited insurance expense directly instead of prepaid insurance. Insurance expense is an expense account. So, yan. So example, on April 30, 2020, X company paid 36,000 worth of insurance premium for 2 years. Give the adjusting entry on June 30, 2020. So dito, June 30 daw yung year-end ng company. So as of June 30, nyo i-adjust yung prepaid insurance. So ang journal entry upon payment of prepaid insurance is debit prepaid insurance for 36,000. So if you notice, you debited the full amount as an asset. 36,000. Prepaid insurance is an asset account. And credit cash, 36,000. And paid 2 years insurance. So the adjusting entry as of June 30, 2020 will be debit insurance expense, 3,000. Credit prepaid insurance. Bakit 3,000? Kasi i-recognize nyo na ngayon as expense yung period, yung month ng May and June. 2 months. So, paano nyo i-compute yung expense for 2 months? 36,000 divided by 24. 24 kasi 2 years. Ilang months sa 2 years? 24. So, makukuha nyo dito yung cost per month. Ang cost per month ng prepaid insurance is 1,500. 1,500 times 2 months is 3,000. So ito, i-expense nyo na ngayon ang expired portion ng prepaid insurance kasi passage of time, nag-expire na yung insurance from May and June. Considered ang June kasi June 30 yung end ng period. So i-consider nyo na siya as 1 month. If June 15 naman, half month lang. Ganon. Okay? Clear ba sa inyo? Yan. The 36,000 insurance premium covers 2 years or 24 months. From April 30 to June 30, 2020, 2 months have passed. Therefore, 2 out of 24 months insurance have expired. An adjusting entry is necessary to record the expired portion of the insurance. So kung hindi kayo nag-adjust ng books, hindi nyo ni-recognize to, overstated ang asset nyo sa financial statements. Understated naman ang insurance expense nyo or ang expense accounts nyo sa understate sa financial statements. So overstate, kapag understated ang expense nyo, overstated ang profit nyo for the year or for the period. Ganon. So kailangan yung i-adjust yung books nyo para correct ang accounting records or it reflects the true condition of the business. Yan. So another example, supplies account showed a balance of 4,000 pesos. Supplies used during the year amounted to 2,300. Give the adjusting journal entry on December 31, 2020. Yan. So, the same lang. Initially, nag-record kayo ng supplies. Debit supplies, asset account, 4,000. And credit cash, 4,000. So, asset method ang ginamit nyo. Ngayon, your adjusting entry will be for the supplies used. Yan, supplies used during the year amounted to 2,300. Your adjusting entry is debit supplies expense, 2,300. And credit supplies, 2,300. Yan. To record the supplies used for the year. So this is under asset method. Yan. So here you have accounting for prepaid expense. Examples, insurance, supplies, advertising, rent, depreciation, and reason for adjustments. Prepaid expenses recorded in asset accounts have been used. Accounts before adjustments, so assets are overstated, expenses are understated. So your adjusting entry is debit expense and credit the asset initially recorded. Okay, so this is under asset method. You also have expense method. So you have to check again when you are solving problem if the company is used asset method in recording initial transaction or expense method in recording initial transaction. Under expense method, you debited initially the expense account. So immediately, you debited the expense account. You didn't recognize an asset when you paid for that prepayment. So you debit expense, credit cash. And then your adjusting journal entry at the end of the accounting period will be debit prepaid asset or prepaid expense and credit expense. Ngayon, binabalik nyo sa asset account yung unexpired portion under expense method naman pag mag-a-adjust kayo. Okay? So, baligtad kapag expense method. Yan. The amount on the adjusting journal entry represents the unexpired or unused portion of the prepayment. Kasi ni-record nyo na siya as expense totally. Totally in the beginning when you recorded the transaction, when you paid for it. Ngayon, ang unexpired portion that will be used next year pa, ibabalik nyo siya as asset. So, yan yung expense method. Example, on April 30, 2020, X company paid 36,000 insurance premium for 2 years. Give the adjusting journal entry on June 30, 2020. So, ang initial entry nyo, debit insurance expense. So, kanina, prepaid insurance ang dinebit natin. This time, insurance expense ang dinebit natin under expense method. And then, credit cash, 36,000. So, your journal entry at the end of the year is ide-debit nyo ang unexpired portion ng insurance. Paano nyo ma-record yung unexpired portion? Ma-compute ang unexpired portion? I-ano nyo lang. Kunin nyo yung monthly charge for the insurance, which is 1,500, and the unexpired portion of 22 months. 22 kasi 24 minus 2 months na expired. So, 33,000. So, dapat alam nyo yung difference kung asset method ba or expense method ang ginamit ng client when recording prepayments. Okay, so clear ba kayo dito sa two methods or na-gets nyo ba or may question kayo? May doubts?
Get lang, ma'am.
Gets lang so far? Okay, good. Yan. So, under expense method naman, assets are understated, expenses are overstated. Overstated kasi na-record nyo siya buo as expense, but hindi pa expired yung para sa next year. So, overstated ang expenses nyo. Understated naman ang assets nyo. Kasi dapat asset pa yung mga unexpired portion. So, ang adjusting entry is debit asset, credit expense. So, baligtad yung dalawa. Yan. So, you have a summary here. Under asset method, initial entry is recorded as an asset. Under expense method, initial entry is recorded as an expense. And then the adjusting entry under asset method is to record the expired portion. And under expense method, to record the unexpired portion. Okay, so now you see the difference between asset and expense method in recording prepayments. Yeah. Now we proceed with unearned or deferred revenue. It is still under deferrals. So you have two methods under this type of adjusting entry also. So unearned, what is unearned or deferred revenue? Is income already received but not yet earned. Yan. It is the opposite of prepaid expense. Yan. Opposite ng prepaid expense kasi bayad na kayo pero hindi nyo pa na-incur. Dito naman, binayaran na kayo pero wala pa kayong right to record as income or revenue. So an adjusting entry for unearned revenues result in a decrease debit to a liability account and an increase credit to revenue account. So you also have two, liability method and income method. Under liability method, your journal entry upon receipt of cash is debit cash, how much yung na-receive nyo from your client, and credit unearned income. Unearned income is a liability account. So kung manotice nyo dito, nandito ba siya? Yan. Under liabilities account siya, unearned income. You don't have the right yet to recognize revenue. Yan. And then your adjusting entry at the end of the accounting period using liability method is debit unearned income. So dito, i-recognize nyo na yung earned portion ng bayad sa inyo na client. So debit unearned income, hindi na siya liability kasi na-earn nyo na siya, and credit income. Yung earned portion lang. So the amount of the adjusting entry is the earned portion of the amount initially received. Example tayo. On August 1, Dr. Yi received 90,000 for dental fees to be rendered in the next 6 months. Give the adjusting entry at the end of September. So, first determine nyo yung timing. August 1 daw niya na-receive yung dental fees na cash for 6 months na payment. So, ang initial entry nyo when you receive the cash is ito, debit cash, 90,000, full amount, credit unearned dental fees, liability, 90,000. So, ano yung adjusting entry nyo on September 30? Ganito. So, i-count nyo how many months from August 1 to September, end of September. 2 months, di ba? So, August and September. Ngayon, August and September passed. So, 2 months na ang nag-pass. So, these 2 months, you already earned these 2 months. Ngayon, i-recognize nyo na at the end of September ang earned portion na 2 months na yun. So, ang entry nyo is debit unearned dental fees, 30,000. Tama ba? 30,000. 90,000 divided by 6 times 2. Yan, tama. So, unearned dental fees, ide-debit nyo na yung liability kasi earned nyo na siya. And credit dental fees or dental revenue, 30,000. To record dental fees earned 90,000 divided by 6 kasi it will be rendered for the next 6 months. So, i-divide nyo lang 90,000 divided by 6 times 2 months na earned nyo na. So, 30,000. Okay? So, clear ba sa inyo yung unearned or deferred revenue under liability method? Yan.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
then, yan. So, under liability method, examples, rent, rent received or rental payments, hindi to rent binayaran nyo. Bale, rent na na-receive nyo from your tenants. So rent, magazine subscriptions, customer deposits for future services. So reason for adjustment, unearned revenues recorded in liability accounts have been earned. So na-earn nyo na, so you need to adjust. Accounts before adjustments, so your liabilities are overstated. Overstated kasi ni-record nyo siya initially as liabilities lahat. Pero portion of those are already earned. So if you don't adjust, your liabilities will be overstated and your revenues understated kasi you didn't recognize the earned portion of the liabilities. So mababa yung revenue nyo, which you should have recognized as revenue already because you have the right. Your adjusting entry is debit liabilities, babawasan nyo na yung liabilities for the earned portion and credit revenues. Yeah, this is under liability method. We also have income method. So you recorded upon receipt of cash initially as income directly. So pag naka-receive kayo ng cash, debit nyo na cash, credit, income, or revenue directly. So your adjusting entry at the end of the accounting period is debit income and credit unearned income. So in this method, the amount of adjusting journal entry is the unearned portion of the amount initially received. So if you are using income method, you will debit the revenue account by the unearned portion. So you will recognize liability for that unearned portion, which you will be providing services after your year end or on the next accounting period nyo pa, ipo-provide yung service na yun to your clients. So example, on August 1, Dr. You received 90,000 for dental fees to be rendered in the next 6 months. So give the journal entry at the end of September adjusting entry. So your initial entry upon receipt of cash is debit cash 90,000, credit dental fees or dental revenue 90,000. Received 6 months dental fees in advance. Yan. So your journal entry on September 30 for the unexpired or unearned portion of your dental fee is debit nyo yung dental fee or debit dental revenue 60,000, credit unearned dental fees 60,000. So baligtad na naman siya ng liability method. Under liability method, i-a-adjust nyo yung earned portion. And sa income method naman, i-a-adjust nyo yung unearned portion. Yan. To record dental fees not yet earned. Paano nyo nakuha yung 60,000? 90,000 divided by 6 times 4. 4 kasi 4 months pa hindi nyo na-earn. Ang na-earn nyo lang is August and September. So may 4 months pa kayong hindi earned na revenue. So ngayon, i-record nyo muna siya as liability until such time ma-perform nyo na yung service to your client. Okay? Yan. So accounting for unearned revenues, initial unearned revenues initially recorded in revenue accounts have not been earned. So if you did this income method, your liabilities is understated and your revenues is overstated. The adjusting entry under income method is debit revenues. You deduct your revenues for the unearned portion and credit liabilities. So you have the summary for unearned revenue. Under liability method, your initial entry is recorded as liability, income method recorded as income. And the adjusting entry at the end of the year or the period is under liability method is to record income earned and income method to record income not yet earned. So here under liability method, your adjusting entry, you will record the earned portion of the cash received. And under income method, the unearned portion of the cash received. Okay? Clear ba sa inyo yung concept ng deferrals, prepayments? May questions kayo, doubts, or hindi nyo na-gets? Ulitin natin. Clear naman so far. Yes?
Pwede po tayo magbalik sa may yung kaninang first example, ma'am, yun sa
Alin?
yun sa may insurance premium for 2 years, ma'am.
Aling method? Asset or
Yun
expense?
sa assets pa, ma'am.
Okay. Yan. So, prepayments, di ba? Prepaid. Yun yung binayaran nyo siya in advance.
Yun sa kuha na, ma'am, yun sa example.
Ayan. Okay.
Yun dyan parte, ma'am. Bakit siya, ma'am, kuhan po? 2 months na ni kuhan?
2
Di ba,
months?
ma'am? Parang 1 month pa rin siya, ma'am. Kasi April 30 man siya, ma'am. So the next day is June na.
Di, na-skip mo yung May. May May pa.
Ayo. Sorry, ma'am.
Okay
Thank
na?
you. Opo.
So, clear na sa'yo. So, okay na to. Hindi na natin ibabalik.
Opo. Okay na, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Sige. Ayan. So, done na tayo sa prepaid expenses and unearned revenues under deferrals. So, now we will proceed to accruals. Accruals naman tayo. Ano kaya yung accruals? Accrual means to recognize income that is already earned but not yet collected, or expense that is already incurred but not yet paid. Ayan. So, ano daw yung income already earned? So, na-perform under accrual, na-perform nyo na yung service sa client nyo, sa customers nyo, na-deliver nyo na yung goods, pero hindi pa sila nagbabayad sa inyo. Or you did not yet collect the cash from them for the services rendered or for the goods delivered. This is under income. And under expense naman, expense is already incurred but not yet paid. So you already incurred that expense. So kailangan nyo na siyang bayaran pero hindi nyo pa siya nababayaran. So i-recognize nyo na siya as expense sa books nyo kahit na hindi nyo pa siya bayad at as of year end. Okay? So without an accrual adjustment, the revenue account and the related asset account, or the expense account and the related liability account, are understated. Thus, the adjusting entry for accruals will increase both a balance sheet and an income statement account. Yan. It gives rise to both income and receivable, or both expense and payable. So, paano kayo mag-a-adjust under accruals? Di ba ang concept natin, income should be recognized or recorded when it is earned, kahit na cash is not yet collected. So you will debit accounts receivable and you credit revenue already earned. So ganun lang yung accrual. I-accrue nyo yung income or yung expense na you have the right to recognize in your books. All adjusting entries involve at least one balance sheet account and one income statement account. All adjusting entries affect the profit or loss for the period. So, yan. It is very important to adjust your books, otherwise your profit or your loss will not be correct. It will either be understated or it will either be overstated. Yan. So how you record? You debit receivable, credit income to record income earned. Examples: interest, rent, services performed but not collected. And reason for adjustments: revenues have been earned but not yet received in cash or recorded. And accounts before adjustments, assets are understated kasi hindi nyo na-recognize yung receivable, and revenues are as well understated kasi na-deliver nyo na yung goods or na-perform nyo na yung service pero hindi nyo pa nare-record as revenue yun. So understated din yung revenue nyo. So adjusting entry would be debit assets or receivable, credit revenue. Yan. This is for accrued revenues. Now we also have accrued expenses. These are expenses incurred but not yet paid or recorded. So an adjusting entry for accrued expenses results in an increase or debit to an expense account and an increase or credit to a liability account. The adjusting entry at the end of the accounting period is debit expense account and credit expense payable account. Yan. So example, under accrued expense, the company received a Maynilad bill in the amount of 9,800 on December 26, 2020. The company intends to pay on January 8, 2021. So, since December 26 nyo na na-receive yung bill, balihin holidays na yon, di na kayo what do you call this? Nagpa-process ng any payments. So, nabayaran nyo siya January 8 lang. Pero as of December 31, expense pa siya for that period, for that year, for that particular year. So, i-accrue nyo ang expense na yon. Debit nyo utilities expense, 9,800, credit utilities payable, 9,800. So, kahit na hindi nyo pa siya bayad, i-recognize nyo na yung utilities expense. At year-end, payable nyo lang siya kasi hindi pa bayad. So, ganito yung concept ng accrued expenses. So, you should record the expense already incurred even though you did not pay for that expense yet. Okay? So, example, interest, rent, and salaries. So, reason for adjustments, expenses have been incurred but not yet paid in cash or you did not record in your books yet. So, accounts before adjustments, expenses are understated and liabilities as well are understated. So, the adjusting entry will be debit expense, credit liabilities. So, you have an income statement account and a balance sheet account. So every accounting and adjusting entry involves a balance sheet account and an income statement account. Yan. So ito yung accruals. So meron tayong dalawang accruals for income and for expense. Income already earned but not yet collected, and expense already incurred but not yet paid. Okay?
Ma'am?
Yes?
Same lang po ba yung account receivable at income receivable?
Same lang yan. Bali, ang mine-mention niya lang dito as income kung anong klaseng income ba siya.
Sige po. Okay, ma'am.
Basta may receivable asset yan. Basta may receivable yan siya. Yan. Okay? So, examples tayo. Accruals of income and expense. ABC Company is preparing its financial statements for the period ended December 31. Adjustments needed are the following. Yan. Case number 1, accrual of income, interest income. ABC Company received a 12%, 100,000 one-year note receivable on April 1. ABC uses a calendar year period. The principal and interest on the note are due on April 1 next year. Okay? So, ano kaya yung adjusting entry natin? Sinong makaka-solve? Try nyo nga i-solve. Ano ang debit and ano ang credit? So first, i-analyze muna natin yung concepts and given information. So first, notes receivable give rise to interest income. Since interest-bearing ang notes nyo, 12%, so there is a corresponding interest income for that note. Yan. Interest income is earned due to passage of time. Calendar year period ends December 31, and interest is collectible on April 1, 2022 next year. So, ito yung mga given information nyo. Next year pa, the principal and interest on the note are due next year. So, there is no cash receipt as of December 31. But you have the right to record income already for the interest, right? So, you have to accrue for such interest at the end of the year, which is December 31. So what is your adjusting entry? Yan, analyze natin further. As of December 31, we should recognize interest income because ABC company earned it due to passage of time. In this case, from April 1 when niya na-receive yung note, start of notes, to December 31, although interest will only be collected on April next year. Yan. Conclusion, interest income shall be accrued for the 9 months covering April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So 9 months. So paano nyo i-compute yung interest income? Principal interest is equal to principal times rate times time. So if maalala nyo sa math nyo or saan nyo ba ito na encounter, PRT, yung computation ng interest. I is equal to PRT, principal times rate times time. So 100,000 ang principal times 12% ang rate times 9/12. 9 lang kasi 9 months lang yung kino-compute natin from April 1 to December. So i-divide nyo muna by 12, 100,000 divided by 12 para ma-compute yung monthly interest accrual times 9 months. So ang interest is 9,000. So 100,000 times 12% is 12,000. So 1,000 per month yung interest na na-earn nyo. So the earned income as of December 31 is 9,000. So ano yung journal entry nyo to record this 9,000? Debit what?
Debit. Ano ba? Na-receive na po ba yan, ma'am?
Hindi pa. Accrual of income pa lang. Kasi ang
Receivable.
babayaran pa siya sa April 1.
So receivable po.
Yes. So debit interest receivable and credit interest income. Yan, correct. Yan. Accounts affected, interest receivable asset and interest income. Effect on accounts, interest receivable is increased, interest income is increased. So what is the debit or the credit? Asset is increased through debit and income is increased through credit. So you're adjusting journal entry as of December 31 to record the interest earned is debit interest receivable 9,000 and credit interest income 9,000. To accrue interest income earned but not yet collected. So if you did not adjust your books for this interest, your asset account in the balance sheet is understated and your revenue account in the income statement is understated also. Okay, so nagets nyo ba? The adjusting entry is dated as at the end of the reporting period, which is December 31. And then interest receivable is debit because interest is yet to be collected in the future. Receivable pa siya kasi hindi ka pa niya babayaran this year but on April next year pa. And in the same year, interest income is recognized only for the expired period, which time has passed, of April 1 to December 31, 2021. Interest covering the remaining 3 months of January 1 to March 31 will be recognized in the next accounting period. So, clear ba sa inyo yung accrual of income? Under example natin sa notes receivable.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Hmm.
Paano po ulit yung nakuha yung 9,000?
Yan. 9,000 ang interest nyo. Ang computation ng interest is principal times rate times time. Principal nyo magkano given sa information 100,000 yung principal nyo. And then ang rate nyo is 12%. So 100,000 times 12% yung interest, total interest nyo for that note is 12,000. So nag-issue kayo ng note sa client or sa kanino kayo nagpautang ng 100,000 tapos 12,000 yung interest na ma-earn nyo. 12,000 yung interest na babayaran sa inyo. And then, times time. Ano yung time nyo? Time nyo is 1 year. So that 12,000 is for 1 year. But you only need to accrue for 9 months. 9 months lang i-accrue nyo kasi yung period na earn nyo is from April 1 to December 31, which is your year end. So you will count now. April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So from April 1 to December 31, 9 months passed. So out of that 12 months or 1 year, 9 months na yung na-earn nyo. So for that 9 months, you have the right to recognize interest income. Yan. For that 9 months, you will, how you compute? 100,000 times 12%, which is 12,000. I-divide nyo by 12 months, 1,000 per month times 9 months, which is 9,000.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Ayan. So, ganun kayo mag-compute ng interest income. So, kapag sinabing ang start niya is April 15, so half month lang, 8.5 lang. Divided by 12 times 8.5. So, i-check nyo lagi yung date para guided kayo kung paano nyo i-compute how many months lang yung expired portion or yung earned portion. So, always check the dates. Okay? Para pag nagko-compute kayo, hindi kayo magkamali. Yan. So, another, in the next accounting period, the collection of the interest is recorded as follows. So, on April, kailan daw yun? April 1, i-collect. Paano nyo i-record yun? Ganito na. So, on April 1 next year, debit nyo na yung cash kasi i-collect nyo na yung interest from your client, from your, sino ba kanino kayo nagpautang? 12,000 yung buo na yung babayaran niya sa inyo. Debit cash 12,000, credit interest receivable 9,000, and credit interest income 3,000. So yung interest income nyo for the next accounting period is only 3,000. Kasi yung 9,000 na record nyo na siya last year. So for this year, which is the correct reflection of the interest income, for only January, February, and March, 3 months lang yung interest income for this year, 2022. So 3,000 lang yung mare-recognize as interest income for such year. So ganito na yung journal entry nyo when you will receive the cash. The cash collection pertains to the 1-year total interest covering the months of April 2021 to March 31, 2022. 100,000 times 12%. The credit to interest receivable pertains to the accrued interest on December 31. So since na-receive nyo na yung interest receivable na ni-record natin nung December 31, nung nag-adjust tayo ng books, i-credit na natin ngayon yung receivable. And the credit to interest income pertains to the 3-month interest income earned in the months of January, February, and March of 2022. 100,000 times 12% times 3/12, which is 3,000. Bakit 312 minus 9? 9 yung earned nyo, so i-deduct nyo lang. Yan. So for the 1-year interest, ganito yung allocation ng interest nyo. 9 months from April 1 to December 31, 2021, and 3 months from January 1 to March 2022. So out of 12 months, 9 months for last year and 3 months for this year. Okay, this is for accrual of interest income or accrual of income. Another example, ABC Company rents out its building to a tenant for a monthly rent of 50,000. As of December 31, 2021, the tenant has not yet paid the rent for the month of December 31, 2021. So concepts and given information, analyze natin. Income is recognized when earned rather than when collected. The tenant has already used the building in December but has not yet paid the rent. Conclusion, rent income for the period of December shall be accrued on December 31. So how do we analyze the transaction? First, you have to determine the accounts affected, rent receivable asset, and rent income. Effect on accounts, rent receivable is increased, rent income is increased. Debit or credit, asset is increased through debit, income is increased through credit. So ano yung journal entry natin dito? Debit, ano yung debit? Wala, tulog, naglalaba. Ano yung debit?
Rent receivable, ma'am.
Yes. Ayan. So, ito yung adjusting entry nyo. Debit rent receivable, 50,000. Rent income, 50,000. To accrue rent income earned but not yet collected. Kasi, ginamit na yung building ba? Yan. Ginamit na ng tenant nyo yung building for December, pero hindi pa kayo binabayaran for December. Kahit na hindi pa kayo binayaran, you have already the right to recognize rent income because they already used the building which you are renting to them. So you debit rent receivable which will be paid next year. Yan. When the rent is collected in the next accounting period, it will be recorded as follows. So, kung binayaran ka nung January, debit cash 50,000, credit rent receivable 50,000 to record collection of the December 2021 rent. Observe that rent income is recognized in 2021 when it was earned rather than in 2022 when it was collected. So this is in accordance with accrual basis of accounting. So gets?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yan. So next example tayo, accrual of expense or interest expense. So kanina, wag kayong malito. Kanina, interest receivable. This example naman, interest expense. So analyze natin yung problem. ABC Company issued a 12% 100,000 one-year note payable on October 1, 2021. The principal and interest are due on October next year. So concepts and given information, notes payable give rise to interest expense. Interest expense is incurred due to passage of time and calendar year period ends December 31. Interest on the note is payable on October next year, no cash outlay as of this year. Yan. As of December 31, 2021, your year-end interest expense is incurred because there is already a passage of time from October to December, which is October, November, December, 3 months, although interest will only be paid in the next accounting period next October pa. So interest expense shall be accrued for the 3 months covering October 1 to December 31, 2021. So, try nyo nga i-compute magkano yung interest expense based sa formula kanina.
Wait,
Magkano?
ma'am.
magkano yung interest expense for the accounting period?
3,000.
Yan. So, same formula, PRT, 100,000 times 12% times 3 over 12. So, 3,000. So, transaction analysis, accounts affected, interest expense, and interest payable. Expense account and liability account. Interest expense is increased, interest payable is increased. Expense is increased through debit, liability is increased through credit. So your journal entry, adjusting journal entry to accrue the interest expense is debit interest expense for 3,000, credit interest payable 3,000. Payable pa lang kasi next year nyo pa naman babayaran on October. Yan. So, interest payable is credited because the interest is yet to be paid in the future. In 2021, interest expense is recognized only for the expired period of time or the time passed from October 1 to December 31, which is 3 months. Interest covering the remaining 9 months of January to October 31 will be recognized in the next accounting period. So when you pay for that interest expense, your entry will be debit interest payable, which you initially accrued or you recorded already on December 31, 3,000. This was a liability before. Now you will debit it. You will delete it in your account because you will already pay for it. And debit also interest expense, 9,000, the interest expense for this year, and credit cash for a total of 12,000. The debit to interest payable pertains to the accrued interest on December 31. So na-notice nyo, nasa books nyo pa rin yung interest payable kasi permanent account siya, liability account siya. So naka-carry over siya from last year to this year, from previous accounting period to the next accounting period. Yan. So another example tayo, accrual of expense for utilities expense. The cost of electricity used for the month of December is 4,000. The electricity bill was received and paid in January. So may instances, late natin nare-receive yung bill. Yung bill ng kung ano man, binibill tayo. So in this case, January niya pa na-receive ang bill and January niya lang nabayaran. Pero as of December 31 siya na electricity, 4,000. So expense is recognized when incurred rather than when paid. The electricity bill, although paid in January, pertains to the usage of December. So calendar year period ends December 31. Conclusion, utilities expense shall be accrued in December 31. So what are the accounts affected? Utilities expense, expense account, and utilities payable liability account. So na-example na natin to kanina. So utilities expense is increased and utilities payable is increased. Expense is increased through debit, liability increased through credit. So your adjusting entry is debit utilities expense for 4,000, credit utilities payable for 4,000 to accrue unpaid utilities. In the next accounting period, the payment of the electricity bill is recorded as follows. Debit utilities payable 4,000, credit cash 4,000. Yan, to record payment of December electricity bill. So, ganun lang yung accrual. So, salaries expense naman tayo. Sorry. Employees earned total salaries of 100,000 in December. However, the salaries were paid only in January. So, accounts affected, salaries expense, and salaries payable. Expense account and liability account. What is the effect? Salaries expense is increased and salaries payable is increased. So, yeah. To journalize this accrual of salaries expense, you debit salaries expense 100,000, credit salaries payable 100,000 to accrue salaries expense. So, ganun lang yung accrual of unpaid expenses. So, done na tayo sa prepayments and accruals. Deferrals and accruals. Now, you also need to adjust your books for depreciation expense. So, under depreciation expense, you have the concept of systematic and rational allocation. Under this concept, costs that provide economic benefits over several accounting periods but cannot be directly associated with the earning of revenues are recognized as expenses over the periods where the economic benefits are consumed. The expenditure to acquire equipment is initially recorded as asset. However, since this expenditure cannot be directly associated with sales as opposed to the cost of inventory sold, the expenditure is recognized as expense over the periods the equipment is used. For example, ng mga nagde-depreciate is building. So, not directly associated with any revenue kasi administrative usage siya. So, ginagamit nyo yung building nyo for your overall business. So, unti-unti nyong i-depreciate yung cost ng building na yon. So, initially, you recorded your building as an asset. But over time, nagde-depreciate yung value ng building nyo. Kasi nagkakasira, nagkaka-crack yung wall, or ano ba, basta nagde-depreciate. So, how do you allocate the cost of the building over a period, over several accounting periods? So, first, you need to get the expertise opinion on like kung ano ba, kanino kayong makakuha ng opinion kung ano yung estimated useful life ng building nyo for how many years. 50 years or 40 years, 30 years, ganun. So you have to determine the useful life of that asset so that you will be able to compute for yearly depreciation. Yan. So example, on January 1, a business acquired equipment for 20,000. The business expects to use the equipment over the next 4 years. So this 20,000, meron siyang economic useful life of 4 years. Yung equipment nyo. Kasi gagamitin nyo siya in producing your goods or whatever. So for 4 years nyo daw siya magagamit. So, your entry when you buy that equipment is, di ba na-discuss natin before, debit equipment and credit cash to record the acquisition of equipment. So, every year, nagde-depreciate yung equipment nyo. So, you need to recognize depreciation expense. So, paano ba yung recording ng depreciation expense? In accounting, depreciation means the allocation of the cost of a depreciable asset over the periods the asset is used. So you allocate this 20,000 over the period asset is used, which is 4 years. So divide nyo lang 20,000 divided by 4 years. So yun yung annual depreciation nyo. On December 31, the equipment has already been used for 1 year out of its total useful life of 4 years. Thus, 1/4 of the cost should be recognized as expense. So your annual depreciation expense is computed as follows. Cost 20,000 divided by useful life, which is 4 years, so your annual depreciation is 5,000. Every year, you recognize 5,000 as depreciation for your equipment. Again, you have to take note of the date. So dito sa example natin, January 1 natin siya binili. But if you purchased it February or March or April or any time during the year other than January 1, you need to count the months. So if for example, June nyo siya binili, 6 months lang yung depreciation nyo. So i-divide nyo pa to by 12 times 6 months. Yun lang yung depreciation nyo for that accounting period. Sa next year, if full year na nagamit, 12 months siya full. which is 5,000. Until such time, ma-consume nyo na yung total cost ng depreciable asset nyo, which is 20,000. So the 5,000 depreciation expense shall be recorded at the end of each of the next 4 years, every December 31 as adjusting entry. So depreciation is the allocation of plant asset cost over its useful life, estimated useful life. This is the expense allotted for the wear and tear of property, plant, and equipment due to passage of time. So wear and tear. Kasi ginagamit nyo siya every day in production or in the business. Three factors involved in the depreciation, in the computation of depreciation. First, your historical cost, initial cost to pay for that asset or PPE. You have the salvage value, and you have the estimated useful life. So the formula to compute depreciation expense is cost minus salvage value or over estimated useful life. So sometimes at the end of the useful life of an asset, you will be able to sell that asset for an amount. Like for example, this equipment, meron siyang salvage value of 1,000 pesos or 2,000 pesos. Mabebenta nyo pa siya as scrap. Scrap value, salvage value, same lang yan. Okay? So, i-minus nyo siya sa cost over estimated useful life. So, at the end of the useful life, ang book value ng asset nyo, equal na lang siya sa salvage value or scrap value. So, kapag binenta nyo na siya, yun na lang yung cost niya. Okay? So, ito, tandaan nyo yung formula ng depreciation. Pag pag given sa problem, yung salvage value or scrap value, i-deduct nyo siya sa cost. Huwag nyo siyang isama sa computation ng depreciation. So, cost minus salvage value over useful life. Yan yung computation ng depreciation. Yan. So, depreciation is the allocation of cost over the useful life of a depreciable asset. So, cost of equipment with 4-year useful life is initially recognized as an asset for 20,000. So, year 1 depreciation expense 5,000, year 2 depreciation expense 5,000. So, ganito yung allocation ng cost ng equipment. Yan, 5,000 each year. So, accounts affected daw, how you record depreciation expense, depreciation expense and accumulated depreciation contra asset. Depreciation expense is increased, accumulated depreciation is increased, expense is increased through debit, contra asset is increased through credit. Adjusting entry is debit depreciation expense 5,000, credit accumulated depreciation 5,000. So accumulated depreciation is a contra asset account of your PPE account. So kapag meron kayong PPE sa books nyo, nandun yung cost, initial cost ng PPE, meron siyang contra account which is accumulated depreciation. So sa financial statements nyo, meron kayong cost ng equipment, 20,000, and whatever charge for depreciation for that equipment is reflected in the accumulated depreciation account. So, ang depreciation expense is temporary account. Kino-close nyo siya sa capital account at year-end. And yung accumulated depreciation naman is a permanent account. So, kine-carry over nyo siya from this accounting period to the next accounting period. The carrying amount of the equipment is determined as follows. So, ganito yung formula. Kapag tinanong sa problem, what is the carrying amount of the equipment? Simply, you get the cost of the equipment less any accumulated depreciation. In this case, in year 1, you have 5,000 charge for depreciation. So, your carrying value as of first year of equipment is 15,000. So next year, pag nag-add kayo ng 5,000, ang carrying value na lang ng equipment nyo next year is 10,000. Until such time, on the fourth year, 20,000 na yung accumulated depreciation nyo, zero na yung carrying value ng equipment. Or kung meron siyang salvage value or scrap value, yung at the end of the useful life, ito na lang yung cost, yung carrying value ng equipment nyo. Yung salvage value niya na lang. In this case, zero kasi hindi naman given yung salvage value. Meaning, hindi niya na mabebenta yung equipment at the end of its useful life. Kahit scrap, wala nang bibili niyan. So it's all about estimate also. It's all about accounting judgments also in the part of management, how they see, how they believe the asset is useful, how many years it will be useful for. So ganun. Yan. So under adjusting entries, we also have bad debts expense. So if you recall, part of our accounting concept, we have this prudence or conservatism. So in preparing your financial statements, you have to be conservative, meaning you have to take account any unfavorable events and reflect them in the books. So in this case, recognition of bad debts expense is an example. So a business example, illustration, a business has total accounts receivable of 2,000 on December 31, 2021, before any adjustments. Of the total amount, it was estimated that 500 is doubtful for collection. So during the period year end, you determine that one creditor or one debtor is having financial difficulty and may utang siya sa inyo na 500. So, na-determine nyo na he is in deep financial difficulty, he cannot pay you. So, you need to recognize this 500 as doubtful account. So, accounts affected, bad debts expense, and allowance for bad debts contra asset. Bad debts expense is increased, allowance for bad debts is increased. So debit, expense is increased through debit, contra asset is increased through credit. Itong allowance for bad debts account nyo naman is a contra account for your accounts receivable. So sa balance sheet, meron kayong accounts receivable, normal balance debit, and contra account of allowance for bad debts credit. So, tandaan nyo, yung contra account ng PPE is accumulated depreciation. For your accounts receivable, you also have a contra account of allowance. So, ang allowance, kina-carry over nyo din siya from one period to next accounting period. Okay? So, hindi siya temporary. Hindi nyo siya kino-close. Ang kino-close nyo lang is bad debts expense. Kasi income statement account siya, di ba na-discuss natin? All income statement accounts are closed each accounting period. So, you determine all your total income or all your revenue less all expenses, including bad debts expense, you will get your net profit. So, this net profit you close to your capital account. Okay? So, for allowance for bad debts, you don't close because it is in the balance sheet. So, it carries over from one period. If this year, nag-recognize kayo ng 500 doubtful account, next year, meron na naman kayong doubtful account. So, for every doubtful account recognized, ina-accumulate nyo siya sa allowance for bad debts account. Until such time, i-reverse nyo na to kapag sure na kayo na hindi na kayo mababayaran, ira-write off nyo na yung receivable. Allowance pa lang siya kasi may chance pa na makolekta nyo siya. Baka magkamilagro na nagkapera yung debtor nyo. So, allowance nyo lang siya i-record. Kapag na-collect nyo naman siya, i-reverse nyo lang. Debit nyo yung allowance, credit nyo yung interest, what do you call this? Your accounts receivable. Yeah. So, expense is increased through debit, contra account is increased through credit. Adjusting entry, ganito yung entry nyo to record the bad debts expense. Debit bad debts expense, 500, and credit allowance for bad debts, 500. The recording of the adjusting entry, the carrying amount of the receivable is brought equal to the estimated collectible account of 1,500. So as of year end, ang estimated collectible account nyo lang is 1,500 kasi may doubtful na 500. So yan. So yan yung mga adjusting entries nyo. Examples of adjusting entries. So meron ba kayong question so far? Done na tayo sa adjusting entries. So try natin mag-solve ng examples. Yan. Problem 1. Entity A issued a 12% 200,000 one-year note payable on April 1. Entity A uses a calendar year period. The principal and interest on the note are due on April 1 next year. What is the adjusting entry on December 31? So, ano kaya yung adjusting entry dito? Ano yung debit, ano yung credit? First, determine nyo yung period. Determine nyo yung relevant dates. Wala kayong nag-gets.
Ma'am, parang nag-stop yung nakikita ko, ma'am.
Ay, sorry.
Iba yung nakikita ko.
Hindi ko
Okay
pala
na po.
na-share. Ayan.
Okay na po.
Ayan. So, paano kaya natin i-journalize yung adjusting entry for number 1?
Interest, ano ba yan, ma'am? Interest receivable.
No. Note payable.
Notes payable.
So, notes payable gives rise to interest income or interest expense? Payable.
Expense.
Yan. So, what is your account adjusting entry? Kapag ano? First, you put the date. Your year end is 31 December. So, debit, ano?
Note payable.
Note payable ba? Paano kayo mag-recognize ng interest for this payable? Hindi niya hindi tinanong sa problem yung initial entry. Tinanong lang sa problem yung adjusting entry na. What is your adjusting entry on December?
So for from April to December,
Interest expense,
Yes. Debit, interest, expense. Credit, ano yung credit?
interest payable,
It's not interest payable. Okay.
Debit, interest, expense. Credit, interest, payable. How much? So, ang computation nyo dito, from April 1 until December 31. How many months?
9.
9. So, ang computation nyo is
18,000 po.
18,000.
200,000 times 12% times 9 months over 12.
18,000. Yan. So, to accrue interest
Interest expense.
incurred 9 months. Ano lang. Okay? So, number 2. On January 1, 2021, Entity A acquired a machine for 100,000. The machine is expected to be used over the next 5 years. What is the adjusting entry on December 31 to take up depreciation expense?
Depreciation expense 20,000.
Debit depreciation expense.
20,000. Then, ano yung sa depreciation?
Ano yung corresponding credit? Ano yan? Yung contra account ng equipment nyo.
Depreciation cost ba yun, ma'am?
Accumulated.
Accumulated depreciation.
Depreciation. Magkano?
20,000
So, 100,000
divided by 5.
divided by 5.
5 years.
Wala namang given, sakto naman na December, na January 1 binili. So, sakto 1 year. Okay? To record depreciation of machine. Ganun lang. And then number 3, a business renting out properties receives 1 year advance rent of 480,000 from one of its tenants on May 1. The advance rent covers the months of May to April next year. So, for 1 year daw yung advance na na-receive. So,
So, i-record siya mo as of December.
a business renting out properties received 1 year advance rent of 480,000 from one of its tenants on May 1. The advance rent covers the months of May to April next year. So, requirements, letter A, provide the journal entry to record the collection on May 1 under each of the following methods. So, A1, so, liability method. Paano yung journal entry nyo sa May 1?
Income receivable.
Under liability method, i-record nyo muna yung initial entry nung na-receive ang rent. Ano yung initial entry nyo?
Prepaid rent.
Liability method. Under deferral, unearned income, unearned.
Cash.
Debit cash. Magkano?
For 480,000.
480.
Credit.
480,000.
Prepaid rent.
Huwag kayo malito ha kung hindi naman kayo yung nagbayad. Kayo yung naka-receive ng cash. So, prepaid pag kayo nagbayad in advance. In this
So,
case,
unearned.
under liability method, so, nirecord nyo daw siya initially as liability. So, ano yung credit nyo under liability method?
Unearned.
Unearned rent. So, same, 480,000. And then, letter B, I, provide the adjusting entry on December 31. So, ano yung adjusting entry nyo pag ganito yung initial entry?
Unearned rent.
So, debit unearned rent, how much? So, i-count nyo ngayon. May 1 nyo na-receive. So, this covers for May, June, July, August, September, October,
7
November,
months.
December. May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. 7 ba? 8, di ba?
So 320,000 po, ma'am.
So, ganito. 480,000
480,000 divided by
12 times.
times 8
8.
months.
So, 320 yung earned
320.
portion. So, yung credit nyo ngayon, ano?
Service.
Credit nyo na yung rent income. Rent income na. Diba? Ito na yung earned portion ng advance rent na na-receive nyo from client. From your tenant. Diba? Tama ba?
Yes, ma'am.
Yan. This is under liability method. Ngayon naman, sa requirement number, ano ba? Requirement number 2, income method naman yung gamit. So, A1, paano nyo i-recognize yung May 1 receipt of cash under income method? What
Cash.
is your initial entry? Same, cash,
Cash.
Cash.
480,000.
Unearned.
And your credit? Income method.
Income.
Rent income.
Credit nyo agad, rent income. So, if na-notice nyo, kinredit nyo agad ang rent income. Pero, ang rent income nyo lang na totoong rent income na earn is 320,000 lang. So, ngayon, paano yung adjusting entry nyo as of December 31? So, remember, under liability method, your adjusting entry will record the earned portion. Under income method, your adjusting entry will record the unearned portion. So, ano yung adjusting entry
So
nyo?
160,000, ma'am.
Ano yung debit? Debit.
Rent income.
O, ite-debit nyo, babawasan nyo yung rent income. Credit.
Unearned income.
Unearned rent.
Credit unearned rent. Credit unearned rent. How much?
60,000.
Divided by 12 times. Magkano? How many months?
8 pa rin? Yung natirang months na lang ba?
4 months.
Unearned. So, di ba, ang earned lang natin is 8 months. So, 12 minus 8,
So,
4.
apat na lang po.
Yan. So,
160,000.
160,000 yung adjusting entry nyo. So, ngayon, nakikita nyo yung difference ng liability method. So, ito yung pinaka-adjusting entry nyo. So, initially, ni-record nyo siya as liability, unearned rent. Ngayon, for your adjusting entry, i-recognize nyo na siya as rent income kasi na-earn nyo na from May until December. So, ide-debit nyo yung unearned rent, which is na-record nyo before, 480, tatanggalin nyo na siya ngayon by 320 kasi rent income nyo na siya talaga as of year end. Under income method naman, initial entry nyo is dinebit nyo buo as rent income. But at the end of the year, 320 lang yung pinaka rent income nyo. So, babawasan nyo yung rent income nyo by 160,000, which is the unearned portion of the rent. Okay? So, pag hindi kayo nag-adjust, under liability method, overstated ang liability nyo by 160,000. And understated naman ang rent income nyo. So, the same is true with income method. Overstated ang rent income nyo, understated ang liabilities. Kapag hindi kayo nag-adjust. Pero pag in-adjust nyo yung books properly, magre-reflect ng tamang amounts, yung income and liabilities nyo. Tama yung financial statements nyo. Okay? So, practice nyo lang to, aralin nyo, para until magets nyo yung concepts ng adjusting entries. So, meron pa tayong example dito. Number 4. A business pays 1-year insurance of 360,000 on August 1.
Debit prepaid insurance.
So, i-try natin using asset method daw. A1. Paano natin August 1. Ano daw yung initial entry? Provide the journal entry to record the prepayment on August 1 under each of the following method. So, asset method,
Prepaid insurance.
debit prepaid insurance.
Insurance, 360.
$360,000. Credit,
Cash.
Cash.
cash. Paid 1 year.
Insurance.
And then, adjusting entry nyo, BI. On December 31. So, paano nyo i-record yung, since asset nyo siya ni-record, hindi naman siya forever asset. Kasi, Due to
Insurance
passage of
expense.
time, ma-expire. So your entry on December 31 to adjust your books is debit. Ano yun?
Insurance expense.
Insurance,
Debit insurance expense.
credit, prepaid insurance.
Credit, prepaid
Prepaid
insurance.
insurance.
Magkano?
150,000 since 5 months
So, paano nyo i-compute? 360,000
divided by 12
12 times
times 5
5.
from August to December.
August, September, October, November, December. 5 months lang yung expired. Okay?
150,000.
So, yan. To record. Expired. Sure. Yan. And then next requirement, kapag gumamit naman daw kayo ng expense method. Ano yung initial entry nyo?
Debit insurance expense.
Debit, insurance,
Insurance expense.
credit
60,000.
cash. Yan. Tapos, ano naman yung adjusting entry nyo at year end?
Prepaid insurance.
Debit,
So sa expense method ma'am, yung natira na lang po ba yung bibilang?
oo. So, i-record nyo siya as asset. And then credit,
Insurance expense.
magkano?
So 360,000
75.
times 7 months na ma'am. Kasi 5
7.
man yung kanina. So 210,000.
Correct. So, ganun. Pag asset nyo siya ni record initially, ibabalik, sa adjusting entry nyo, magre-recognize kayo ng insurance expense. Pag expense nyo naman siya ni-record initially, ibabalik nyo siya as asset for your adjusting entry. So, under asset method, you recognize the expired or the expense portion. Under expense method, you recognize the asset or the unexpired portion. So, baligtad yung dalawang methods. So, it's all about how you recorded the transaction initially. You have to know, you have to check how you recorded it initially or in the first place so that you will know how to adjust your books. So that you will know which one is overstated and which one is understated. Okay, so clear ba sa inyo yung both methods?
Yes ma'am.
Yan.
Yes, ma'am.
Madami pa pala to. So last problem tayo. Ay, hindi, may time pa. 1 hour. So ito. Entity A received a 10% 200,000 one-year note receivable on July 1. Entity A uses a calendar year period. The principal and interest on the note are due on July 1 next year. What is the adjusting entry? So ito naman, in this case, notes receivable. So what is your adjusting entry? Aning i-recognize nyo dito on December 31?
Income receivable ba ito, ma'am?
Interest.
Interest
Diba?
receivable.
Kapag may note payable or may note receivable, you will be incurring or earning interest.
Receivable.
Yan.
Interest
So,
receivable.
you will recognize interest income. So, debit interest receivable, credit interest income. So, magkano? Paano nyo siya i-compute or sinabi na naka-receive kayo on July 1. So, from July 1 to December 31, you will earn interest income.
10,000.
So, let's compute first for the interest.
100,000
200,000
times 10%
times
from July, September, October, November, December. 6 months.
So, 6.
6 divided by 12.
Yan. So, 10,000 yung accrual ng interest nyo. To accrue interest income on notes receivable. Ganun lang. Yan. So, take note of the dates pag nagsosolve kayo, pag nagko-compute ng interest expense or ng interest income. So, next example, entity A issued 12%, 200,000 one-year note payable naman on November 1. Entity A uses calendar year period. The principal and interest will be due next November 1. What is the adjusting entry on December 31? So, pag notes payable, ano yung nai-incur?
Interest expense.
Interest expense.
Interest expense. So, debit, anong debit?
Interest expense.
Interest expense.
Debit interest expense, credit
Interest payable.
interest payable. Kasi, na-incur nyo na ang expense, but babayaran nyo siya next year lang ng November. So, you have to accrue interest expense on notes payable. Magkano? Paano nyo i-compute yung interest expense?
$100,000 times 2.12 times 2 since 2 months lang divided by 12.
Correct.
4,000.
4,000.
So, principal, 200,000 times 12% rate times 2 over 12. 2 lang kasi 2 months lang. November and December nyo lang i-accrue yung interest expense. So, yung cut-off nyo is December 31. So, 2 months lang which is 4,000. Yan. So, number 3 tayo. Your business is renting a space. The monthly rental is 120,000 on December 31, 2021. The rent for the months of November and December are not yet paid. What is the adjusting entry daw on December 31?
Rent receivable.
Debit rent receivable.
Receivable. 140,000.
So, 2 months, di ba? November and December. Not yet paid but already earned. So, 120,000 times 2.
2.
Credit. Ano yung corresponding credit?
Income?
Rent income.
Rent income.
So, kasi income nyo na siya, revenue nyo na siya. Yan. Ganun lang. And then number 4, a business receives its electricity bill for the period amounting to 6,000. What is the entry to record the receipt of the bill prior to its payment?
Debit utilities expense.
Debit utilities expense. Credit. Hindi nyo pa siya bayad, so ano siya sa books
So,
nyo?
payable.
Utilities, payable. Magkano daw? 6,000.
6,000.
Okay. Ganun lang. Number 5 naman tayo. On January 1, your business acquires a computer equipment for 120,000. You expect to use the computer over the next 3 years. What is the adjusting entry on December 31 to take up depreciation expense?
Depreciation expense.
Debit depreciation expense. Credit.
Credit accumulated depreciation.
Accumulated depreciation ha, hindi accumulated depression. May nakita akong accumulated depression. Magkano? Paano nyo i-compute yung depreciation nyo?
Divided by 3 years sa 40,000.
1,000.
Divided by 3.
Ganon. Since full year naman siya, January siya na purchase, so hindi nyo na siya i-divide by how many months. So by 12 siya. Ganito. Okay. To record then number 6, last two na. Your business has accounts receivable of 300,000. You estimated that out of that amount, 10% is doubtful collection. What is the adjusting entry to
Debit.
record the doubtful?
Debit bad debt expense.
Debit bad debts expense. Credit.
Credit allowance for bad debts.
Allowance for bad debts. Okay. So, magkano?
3,000.
300,000 times
100,000 times
0.10%.
0.10.
So,
30
simply, i-ano nyo lang. To record allowance for bad debts. Ganun lang. So, number 7, last problem. Yung natira, ano na lang, i-short quiz. So, your business is renting out properties on June 1 for your business 2021. Your business receives 1-year advance rent of 360,000 from one tenant of your tenants. The advance rent covers the months of June to May 2022. So provide the journal entry to record the collection on June 1 under liability and income method. So liability method tayo. A1. So ano yung entry nyo?
Debit unearned rent.
Anong date? 1 June. Debit ano?
Unearned rent.
Naka-receive kayo ng advance rent. Ano yung debit? Naka-receive kayo ng
Cash.
cash. How much? 360,000. Credit,
Rent income.
liability method.
Unearned rent.
Credit, unearned rent. And then, BI, ano yung adjusting entry nyo? December 31.
Debit unearned rent.
Credit,
Rent income.
how much?
$360,000 divided by 12 times 7 months since June to December.
Yan, 210,000. Parang same lang siya kanina. Yan. Under asset, income method, ano yung entry nyo?
Rent income debit.
Debit or credit?
Cash.
Debit cash. So, wag niyong kalimutan, di ba ang normal balance ng liability and income account is credit. So, if you will increase those accounts, you credit it. So, rent income. And then, what will be your adjusting entry?
By December, debit rent income.
Debit rent income, credit,
Unearned rent.
Unearned.
Unearned rent.
unearned rent. Magkano?
360,000 divided by 12 times 5. Yun na lang yung dinagamit.
Correct. So, ganun lang. I-review nyo lang to, then yung natira, may natira pa ata dito. I-short quiz ko na lang.
Baka mas mahirap na yung mga nasa baba, ma'am.
Hindi yan mahirap, same lang yan. Yan. So, okay na? I-post ko na lang yun as short quiz lang. May questions kayo? May hindi kayo naintindihan?
Kailan yan i-submit, ma'am?
Alin?
Pag magpa-short quiz ka, ma'am.
Lagi naman 1 week yung duration ng quizzes. So, kapag bubuksan ko today, so after 1 week yung submission. Pero isang attempt lang.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, i-send nyo po ito, ma'am.
I-upload ko lang. I-send ko rin doon sa e-class. Okay na?
Ano yung coverage ng quiz, ma'am?